I arrived at my parents' house for what I thought was a family dinner. My sister Courtney was there, mascara running down her face. Before I could even set down my purse, Courtney screamed, "Why don't you just disappear?" She blamed me for ruining her life, for destroying her engagement to Trevor. Our parents, Carol and Paul, didn't stop Courtney. Instead, they nodded. My father said, "Courtney's right. You've always been jealous of her." I didn't argue. I picked up my purse, walked out the door, and drove away. That was 3 months ago. This morning, my phone lit up with 40 missed calls from all of them. I stared at my phone screen, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The missed calls kept coming. Voicemails piled up faster than I could delete them. Text messages flooded my screen. "Call us now. It's an emergency. You owe us this." I didn't listen to a single voicemail. I deleted them all and blocked all 3 numbers. My fingers moved automatically, like I'd been practicing for this moment. I was sitting in my new apartment, a small studio in a city 2 hours away from my hometown. It was Saturday morning, and I'd been drinking coffee, finally feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, quiet peace. The kind where you wake up without a knot in your stomach. The kind where you don't spend the first hour of your day dreading a phone call from your mother asking why you haven't fixed some problem that isn't actually yours. Those 3 months since I walked out had been the hardest and the best of my life. That night, after leaving my parents' house, I drove straight to a hotel. I cried for hours, went through an entire box of tissues, and ordered room service at midnight because I couldn't sleep. But then, something shifted. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I stopped crying and started planning. I'd been the office manager at my parents' restaurant supply business for 6 years. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, of managing everything while Courtney showed up twice a week to take photos for social media. She'd post pictures of herself in the warehouse, caption them with things like grinding and girl boss energy, and our parents would praise her for being such a great brand ambassador. Meanwhile, I was the one processing orders, managing inventory, dealing with vendors, and keeping the books. What I realized that night in the hotel was something I'd been avoiding for years. I'd been using my own savings to cover business expenses when cash flow was tight. My parents always promised they'd pay me back. They never did. I'd loaned the business $12,000 over 2 years, always told myself it was helping the family. But that money went straight to funding Courtney's lifestyle. Her apartment in the nice part of town, her car payments, her shopping trips. The next morning, I withdrew myself from all business accounts. I removed my name as an authorized signer on everything I could. I took only what was legally mine, which wasn't much. I packed my apartment in 2 days, loading everything I owned into my small sedan. I left no forwarding address. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just disappeared, exactly like Courtney had screamed at me to do. Starting over in a new city with $3,000 felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. I found a job as an administrative assistant at a medical office within a week. The salary was small, barely $30,000 a year, but it was honest work. No family drama, no guilt trips, no being told I wasn't doing enough while watching my sister do nothing. I made one friend at work, a woman named Diana, who was close to my age. She was kind and funny, and she didn't know anything about my family. To her, I was just Hope, the new girl who was good at organizing files and always brought homemade cookies on Fridays. I started seeing a therapist who helped me recognize the scapegoating pattern I'd been living in for 28 years. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I slept through the night without anxiety dreams. But I'd left something behind that I didn't fully understand. The full story of why Courtney blamed me was more complicated than simple sisterly jealousy. Courtney's fiancé Trevor had started asking me questions about her past a few months before that awful dinner. He'd pulled me aside at a family barbecue and asked casually if Courtney had been engaged before. I'd answered truthfully because I didn't see any reason to lie. I told him she'd been engaged twice before, and both times she'd broken it off when she found someone she thought was better. Trevor broke up with Courtney 3 days later. She convinced our parents I'd sabotaged her relationship out of jealousy. The real jealousy, though, had always run the other way. I'd been the responsible one. Good grades, worked hard, never caused trouble. Courtney was beautiful and charming, and our parents' obvious favorite. Every achievement I had was minimized. Every failure Courtney had was excused. It was just how our family worked, and I'd accepted it because I didn't know I had another option. Now, sitting in my studio apartment with 40 missed calls lighting up my phone, I felt my stomach drop. Despite everything, despite the cruelty and the blame and the years of being treated like I was less important, I still cared. That's the thing about family. You can know they're wrong, you can know they've hurt you, but some part of you still wants them to love you back. I looked at my blocked call log one more time. My mother had managed to call from a different number I hadn't blocked yet. The voicemail preview showed on my screen. "Your sister is in the hospital. How can you be so cruel?" My hands went cold. I unblocked my mother's number and called back. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been holding the phone, waiting. "Hope, thank God. We've been trying to reach you for hours. What happened to Courtney? Is she okay?" There was a pause. A long pause that made my chest tighten. "Courtney's fine. She's not in the hospital." I felt anger flash hot through my body. "You lied? You said she was in the hospital." My mother's voice turned cold, all the fake warmth draining out in an instant. "We needed you to call us back. The IRS is auditing the business. We need you to come sign some papers. You're still listed on some accounts." I removed myself from everything 3 months ago. I made sure of it. "You signed as guarantor on our business loan 2 years ago. Do you remember that? You signed papers at the bank." I did remember. The bank had required a personal guarantee before approving the loan. My parents said it was just a formality, that the business was doing great, that nothing would ever come of it. I'd signed because I trusted them. "If we go under, they're coming after you too," my mother continued. "You'll be liable for $250,000, so you better help us fix this, or you'll lose everything too." My blood ran cold. $250,000. I looked around my tiny studio apartment, at the secondhand furniture I'd bought, at the life I'd built with so little. It could all disappear. I could lose everything I'd worked for, everything I'd rebuilt. "So you're going to help us, aren't you, Hope?" my mother asked. It wasn't really a question. It was a threat wrapped in expectation. I realized then that I wasn't free at all. My family had a legal chain around my neck, and they knew exactly how to pull it tight. I sat paralyzed in my studio apartment after hanging up with my mother. My coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't move to make a fresh cup. I couldn't move at all. $250,000. The number kept echoing in my head, getting louder each time. I forced myself to pick up my phone and call the bank. It took 20 minutes of being transferred between departments before I got someone who could access the loan documents. The woman on the phone confirmed what I'd been afraid of. Yes, there was a personal guarantee. Yes, I was listed as a guarantor. Yes, if the business defaulted on the loan, I would be legally responsible for the full amount. My $3,000 in savings and my fresh start suddenly felt meaningless against a $250,000 debt hanging over my head like a sword. My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize, but I knew it was them. I answered. It was my father this time. His voice was warm, apologetic, the tone he used when he wanted something. "Hope, honey, we overreacted that night. Your mother was upset. You know how she gets." I didn't say anything. I just listened. The IRS found some irregularities in the business accounting. Nothing serious, just some confusion with how we filed things. "We need you to come in and help us sort through old records. You're the only one who understood the filing system. You always were so good at organizing everything." The compliment felt like manipulation, but I was terrified enough about the loan guarantee to listen. "Just one day," he continued. "Come on. Sunday, we'll go through the documents together, get everything straightened out, then this whole mess will be over." I hesitated. Every instinct told me not to go. But the loan guarantee was real, and I couldn't ignore it. Fine, Sunday. But just to review documents. Nothing else. That's my girl. We'll see you at 10. He hung up before I could change my mind. Sunday morning, I made the 2-hour drive back to my hometown. Every mile felt heavier. The restaurant supply business looked the same from the outside. Same brick building. Same sign my father had been so proud of when he first opened the place 15 years ago. Inside, my parents were waiting. They were overly friendly, smiling too much, offering me coffee and asking about my new apartment. Courtney wasn't there. "She's too upset to see you," my mother said, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I sat at my old desk and started going through financial records. Within an hour, I saw the problem. There were massive discrepancies between reported income and actual deposits. Cash transactions weren't recorded properly. Personal expenses were running through the business account. My father's new truck, listed as a company vehicle. Courtney's apartment rent, listed as office space. My mother's cosmetic procedures, listed as professional development. But what made my stomach turn were the invoices I'd never seen before. Purchase orders for equipment, receiving documents for inventory, all with my signature at the bottom, except I'd never signed them. I pulled out my phone and took photos of several documents, comparing the signatures closely. They were good forgeries. Very good, but not perfect. The loop on the H in Hope was slightly different. The angle of my signature's baseline was wrong. Someone had been forging my signature on business documents. My parents kept bringing me more paperwork, hovering, watching me closely. They needed me to confirm the records were accurate for the IRS. They wanted me to sign off on everything. Finally, my father stopped pretending. He pulled up a chair, sat down, and looked at me with hard eyes. "The IRS is going to assess back taxes and penalties. Could be $300,000. I looked up from the documents. $300,000? We need you to take responsibility for the accounting errors. Tell them you made mistakes when you were managing the books. That's fraud. You're asking me to admit to tax evasion. You signed documents as our accountant," my mother said. "You're already responsible. I was office manager, not your accountant. And I didn't sign half of these." I held up one of the forged documents. My father's face hardened. "If you don't help us, we'll have no choice but to tell the IRS you were the one cooking the books. We'll say you did it without our knowledge, that you had access to everything." Before I could respond, Courtney walked in. She looked perfect, as always. Hair and makeup done, designer clothes, sweet smile on her face. "Hope, I forgive you for what you did with Trevor. Let's just move past it." She sat down next to our parents. "I've been helping with the business since you left. It's been so hard without you. The records were such a mess. I understood then." Courtney had been setting me up. She'd been in the office, had access to documents, could have forged my signature on anything. "See?" Courtney said to our parents. "I told you she'd refuse to help. She wants to see us fail. She's always resented me, and now she's punishing all of you too." I stood up. "I'll help you properly. We can hire a lawyer, file amended tax returns, set up a payment plan with the IRS. But I won't lie. I won't commit perjury." My father's face turned red. "We can't afford that. The penalties would destroy us. After everything we did for you, you won't help your own family? I'll help you honestly. Or not at all." I walked out. The 2-hour drive back to my apartment felt longer this time. I spent that night researching IRS whistleblower programs. I had evidence of fraud, the forged signatures. I could potentially protect myself by reporting them first. But they were still my parents. Could I really do that? I decided to find a lawyer before making any decisions. I needed advice from someone who wasn't emotionally involved. Monday morning, I was at work at the medical office when my boss called me into her office. Dr. Sarah Chen looked uncomfortable. "Hope, I received a very disturbing phone call this weekend. From your family's attorney." My stomach dropped. "They're claiming you embezzled from the family business." They filed a civil lawsuit against you for $150,000. I couldn't breathe. I have to put you on administrative leave pending investigation. I'm sorry, but I have to protect the practice. I was sent home, suspended without pay. I walked out of the office in a daze. When I got back to my apartment, there was an envelope taped to my door. Legal documents. I'd been served with the lawsuit. I sat on my floor and read through the papers. They were alleging I'd stolen cash deposits and falsified records over a period of 3 years. They included copies of documents with my forged signature as evidence that I had been acting independently without their knowledge or approval. They'd taken the very documents that proved they'd forged my signature and were using them to frame me. The lawsuit demanded $150,000 in damages. I had 3 weeks to respond or face a default judgment. I calculated my situation. I had $2,000 left in savings after paying rent and expenses for the past 3 months. My rent was $800, due in 2 weeks. A lawyer consultation would cost hundreds of dollars. Without my paycheck, I couldn't afford both rent and legal help. My family knew exactly what they were doing. They were backing me into a corner, cutting off every escape route, help them commit fraud, or they'd destroy me financially and legally. I was trapped. I scraped together $500 for a lawyer consultation. It was money I needed for rent, but I needed advice more. The attorney, Patricia Hayes, had an office in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. Her rates were lower than the big firms downtown, which was the only reason I could afford to see her at all. Patricia reviewed the lawsuit documents while I sat across from her desk, trying not to cry. She was in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This is a strategic lawsuit," she said finally. "They're trying to intimidate you into cooperating with whatever they want. But if you fight it, discovery will expose their fraud. They might be counting on you not being able to afford to fight back." "I can't afford to fight," I said. "I just got suspended from my job. I have $2,000 to my name." Patricia nodded. "Defense would cost at least $15,000, maybe more if it goes to trial. I'd recommend you file a countersuit for fraud and forgery, but that requires resources you don't have." She wrote down a phone number. "This is Legal Aid Services. They might be able to help." I left her office feeling more hopeless than when I'd arrived. $500 poorer, with a phone number for legal aid, and the knowledge that I was facing a legal battle I couldn't afford to fight. My phone started ringing constantly. My family had started a campaign, calling from different numbers to get through my blocks. The messages ranged from pleading to threatening. My mother left a voicemail saying my grandmother was heartbroken, that I'd abandoned the family. My father left one saying they'd raised me better than this, that I was destroying Courtney's mental health. Courtney sent a long text message about how she'd tried to defend me, but even she couldn't excuse what I was doing now. The manipulation was textbook. I recognized it from the therapy sessions I could no longer afford. But recognizing it didn't make it hurt less. I tried to fight back. I went to the police station and filed a complaint about the forged signatures. I brought the photographs I'd taken, showed them the comparison between my real signature and the forgeries. The detective who took my report was sympathetic but not optimistic. "Forgery is hard to prove, especially with family," he explained. "Family members sign for each other all the time. Without a handwriting expert to testify in court, it's your word against theirs. And handwriting experts cost thousands of dollars." The report was filed, but I left the station knowing nothing would come of it. I was documenting everything, but documentation without money to fight back was just paper. Then Courtney posted on social media. A long, emotional post about family betrayal and how success changes people. She didn't mention me by name, but she didn't have to. Anyone who knew our family would understand exactly who she was talking about. The post talked about supporting a sister through difficult times, only to be abandoned when that sister decided she was too good for her family anymore. The comments flooded in. Old friends from high school, people from our hometown, all expressing sympathy for Courtney. Some of them messaged me directly, asking what was going on, saying this didn't sound like me, but I couldn't defend myself. My lawyer had warned me that anything I said publicly could be used against me in the lawsuit. So I stayed silent, which made me look guilty. I deleted my social media accounts. It was easier than watching people I'd known my whole life believe I was the villain in this story. Diana, my coworker from the medical office, was the only friend I had left. She came to check on me during my suspension. We sat in my studio apartment, and I told her everything. She listened without judgment, which made me cry harder than any of the cruel messages from my family had. "Let me lend you money for a lawyer," Diana offered. "I can't take your money. You're not taking it. I'm lending it. You can pay me back when this is over." She paused. "My husband Marcus works in forensic accounting. Maybe he can look at those documents informally, help you build a defense. He won't charge you." I was too desperate to refuse. I gave Diana copies of the photographs I'd taken. That evening, Marcus called me directly. "Hope, this is worse than you think." His voice was serious. "These documents show a pattern of systematic fraud over at least 5 years. Cash skimming, fake vendors, inflated expenses. Someone sophisticated set this up. This was an amateur hour. What does that mean for me? It means whoever did this knew how to hide it. They had help, probably from a professional. But if the IRS discovers the full extent of the fraud, the penalties could exceed $500,000. And with your name on that loan guarantee." He didn't have to finish. I understood. I could lose everything and still owe money I'd never be able to pay. 2 days later, my landlord slid a notice under my door. Eviction proceedings initiated. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint saying I was running an illegal business from the apartment. My landlord had also received a call from someone claiming to be my previous landlord, saying I'd destroyed property and skipped out on rent. All lies, but my landlord was required to investigate. I had 30 days' notice to move out. That same afternoon, I checked my credit cards to see if I could use them for lawyer fees. Every single one was maxed out. 4 cards, $12,000 in charges I hadn't made. Purchases at luxury boutiques in my hometown, expensive dinners, jewelry stores. Someone had stolen my credit card information and gone on a shopping spree. I called the credit card companies, filed fraud reports, but the representatives all said the same thing. Investigations take 60 to 90 days. In the meantime, I was responsible for the charges. My credit score had dropped 150 points overnight. I sat on the floor of the apartment I was being evicted from, looking at credit card statements for purchases I hadn't made, facing a lawsuit I couldn't afford to defend, suspended from a job I'd already lost, and realized my family wasn't just suing me. They were systematically destroying my entire life to force me back under their control. I spent an entire day on the phone with credit card companies, being transferred from department to department, repeating the same story over and over. $12,000 in fraudulent charges across 4 cards. The purchases were all made in my hometown over the past week. Designer clothes from boutiques, meals at expensive restaurants, jewelry, electronics. Someone had used my cards like they were going on a celebration shopping spree. The credit card representatives were polite but useless. "We'll investigate, but it can take 60 to 90 days. Meanwhile, I was liable for every charge. The interest was already accumulating. My credit score, which I'd worked so hard to build, was destroyed. I went to the police station in my new city to file an identity theft report. The officer who took my information looked skeptical from the start. "Do you know who might have access to your personal information?" "My family. My parents have all my documents. Social security number, birth certificate, everything. They kept all that stuff because I worked for their business." The officer raised an eyebrow. "So family members who legitimately have access to your information. Are you sure this isn't just a misunderstanding? Maybe they thought they had permission?" I explained the timeline. The charges started the day after I refused to help them with the IRS issue. The officer took notes but didn't seem convinced. "Family disputes are complicated. Might be better to work this out between yourselves, rather than involving law enforcement." I left the station with a report number. but no hope that anything would come of it. The police weren't going to investigate my family for using information they'd always had access to. My eviction notice deadline was approaching. With my credit destroyed, I couldn't rent another apartment. Even if I could prove the eviction was based on false complaints, I didn't have money for a legal fight. Diana offered to let me stay on her couch temporarily. I moved my belongings out of my studio apartment with 2 weeks left on the lease, forfeiting my security deposit. Everything I owned fit into 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. I was 28 years old and essentially homeless. Then my boss from the medical office called. Dr. Chen's voice was apologetic but firm. "Hope, I wanted to tell you personally before you heard it officially. We're going to have to let you go." But I thought I was just on administrative leave. The background check company received additional information. An anonymous tipster sent documentation showing you were fired from your previous position for theft. Your family's business filed paperwork with the state showing you were terminated for cause. This contradicts your resignation letter. I wasn't fired. I resigned. They're lying. I want to believe you, but I have to protect the practice. I'm sorry. We'll mail your last paycheck, but we're holding it pending resolution of the suspension investigation. I was fired. No job, no income, no health insurance. My last paycheck was being held hostage. I sat on Diana's couch that afternoon and did the math. No job meant no income. $12,000 in fraudulent credit card debt. A lawsuit demanding $150,000. Potential liability for the $250,000 business loan. $47 in my checking account. I applied for unemployment benefits. Denied because I was terminated for cause. I applied for food stamps and was approved for minimal assistance. $92 a month in benefits. I applied for emergency housing assistance and was put on a waiting list that was 6 months long. I sat in the social services office, surrounded by other people in crisis, and cried. This was the lowest point of my entire life. My family had done this to me deliberately, methodically, efficiently. They'd mapped out every way to destroy my life and executed the plan perfectly. I took a job at a convenience store that paid cash under the table. $7.25 an hour, which was below minimum wage, but the owner didn't ask questions and paid in cash at the end of each shift. I worked the night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 40 hours a week, $290 a week. Not enough to save anything, barely enough to buy food and give Diana a little money for letting me stay on her couch. I worked and slept and worked again. I was exhausted all the time. My body hurt from standing on concrete floors for 8 hours. I smelled like the convenience store, a mix of hot dogs and cleaning chemicals. I wore the same 3 outfits over and over because I couldn't afford laundry at a laundromat. I was humiliated and defeated and barely surviving. My mother came into the convenience store one night around 2 a.m. I was restocking cigarettes behind the counter when she walked in. She looked at me in my red vest and name tag, and something like satisfaction crossed her face. "Hope, look at you. Is this really what you want? You could come home, help us fix this mess. We'd take you back." "Take me back? You destroyed my life. We're trying to save the family business. You're being selfish." "I'm being selfish? You stole my identity, maxed out my credit cards, got me fired from my job and sued me. That's not trying to save anything. That's punishing me for not doing what you want." My mother's face hardened. "Just sign the papers, saying the accounting was your responsibility. We'll make everything go away. The lawsuit, the debt, all of it." "No, you stubborn, selfish girl. We gave you everything. This is how you repay us? You gave me everything? You treated Courtney like a princess and me like an employee. You paid her for doing nothing and expected me to work for free. You used my money to fund her lifestyle and then blamed me when it wasn't enough." My mother picked up a bottle of soda from the cooler and threw it at me. It hit the wall next to my head and exploded, spraying soda everywhere. Then she stormed out. I stood there, covered in soda, and cleaned up the mess. My manager came out from the back. "You okay?" That was my mother. He looked at me with pity and went back to his office. I finished my shift covered in sticky soda, crying silently while I mopped floors and restocked shelves. I saw on social media, through Diana's account, that Courtney was engaged again to a wealthy real estate developer named Craig. The wedding was planned for 3 months away. A big, expensive wedding at a country club. I realized then what this was really about. They needed money for Courtney's wedding. They needed to resolve the IRS issue before the wedding, so they could access credit. They needed me to take the fall so Courtney could have her perfect day. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't about the business. This was about maintaining the family's image and giving Courtney everything she wanted, just like they'd always done. I was just collateral damage in their plan. A sheriff's deputy came into the convenience store during my shift one night. He served me with papers right there at the register. The credit card company was suing me for the fraudulent charges. $12,000. I now had 2 active lawsuits against me. The deputy also gave me a subpoena. The IRS wanted to depose me about the business records. I was scheduled to give testimony in 2 weeks. Without a lawyer, I'd be walking into that deposition completely unrepresented. Anything I said could expose me to criminal liability. If I told the truth about the forgeries, my family would claim I was lying to avoid responsibility. If I stayed silent, I'd look guilty. I was trapped completely. No way out, no resources to fight, and no one who could help me. I stood in that convenience store at 3 a.m., holding legal papers, and understood that I'd lost. My family had won. They'd destroyed me. The legal aid office was in a rundown building downtown. The waiting room was packed with people who looked as desperate as I felt. I sat there for 2 hours before I could see an attorney. When my name was finally called, I met James, a tired-looking man in his 40s who clearly had too many cases and not enough time. He reviewed my situation quickly, flipping through the documents I'd brought. The lawsuit from my family, the credit card lawsuit, the IRS subpoena. His face got more concerned with each page. "This is complex federal tax litigation. We handle landlord-tenant disputes and simple civil cases. I can't represent you in the IRS deposition. That's beyond our scope. Can you at least tell me what to do? Ask for a postponement. Try to save money for an attorney. But postponing might make you look uncooperative, which could hurt you later." He closed the folder. "I'm sorry. I wish I could help more." I left feeling more hopeless than when I'd arrived. I had 1 week until the deposition, and no plan. That night, I made a decision I'd been avoiding. I called my father's office line at the business. He answered on the second ring. "Hope? I want to make a deal." Finally showing some sense. "I'll testify honestly to the IRS about what I know. I'll tell them about the documents I signed and the ones I didn't. But I won't lie. I won't say I made accounting mistakes when I didn't. I'll be truthful, but I won't go out of my way to implicate you. That's the best I can offer." There was a long pause. "That's not good enough. You need to say you made the mistakes. Take responsibility." "I won't commit perjury." "Then you're on your own." He hung up. 2 days before the deposition, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hope? It's Trevor, Courtney's ex." I was stunned. "Trevor? How did you get my number?" "I heard through some mutual friends what's happening. I wanted to talk to you. Can we meet for coffee? I have something I need to tell you." We met at a diner near Diana's house the next morning. Trevor looked the same as I remembered, tall and clean-cut, but older somehow. He sat down across from me and got right to it. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you when Courtney blamed you for our breakup. I knew she was lying, but I just wanted out of that situation. I took the easy road." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I know what your family is capable of. The real reason I broke up with Courtney wasn't because of what you told me about her past engagements. I mean, that was part of it, but there was more." He paused. "She stole my credit card information, made purchases, and told me my account had been hacked. Then I found the clothes in her closet, exact matches to the charges. When I confronted her, she cried and said she'd been planning to surprise me, that she was going to tell me. It was clearly a lie. My chest tightened. She did the same thing to me. $12,000 in fraudulent charges. Your sister has a problem, Hope. She's been doing this to people for years. My family decided not to press charges because we didn't want the drama, but I feel guilty now. By staying quiet, I let you become her next target. He pulled out a folder. I wrote down everything that happened. Dates, amounts, what she told me, what I found. I'll sign it as a statement if you need it. It shows a pattern of behavior. I took the folder with shaking hands. Finally, I had something to fight back with. Evidence that Courtney had done this before. Proof of a pattern. Thank you, I whispered. Trevor left, and I sat in that diner for another hour, reading through his statement. It was detailed and damning. Courtney had stolen almost $8,000 from him over 3 months. He'd documented everything before breaking up with her. I made copies of Trevor's statement that afternoon. I felt, for the first time in weeks, like maybe I had a chance. The IRS deposition was held in a field office downtown. I wore my best outfit, which was a dress I'd bought at a thrift store. I brought every document I had. The forged signatures, Trevor's statement, my evidence of the credit card fraud, everything. The IRS agent conducting the deposition was a woman named Sharon Williams. She was in her 50s, professional, with cold eyes that didn't show any sympathy. The room was small and windowless. A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers poised over her machine. Sharon started with basic questions. My role in the business, my responsibilities, how long I'd worked there. I answered everything truthfully. I was the office manager. I handled daily operations, inventory, basic bookkeeping, but I wasn't an accountant. I followed my parents' directions. Then, Sharon showed me the documents, the ones with forged signatures. Are these your signatures? No. Someone forged them. Sharon made a note. You're denying you signed these documents? I'm not denying anything. I'm telling you the truth. Those aren't my signatures. Look at this. I pulled out comparison examples. See how the H is different? The baseline angle is wrong. Someone copied my signature, but it's not exact. Sharon examined the documents but didn't seem impressed. We've received testimony from your parents and your sister. They state you were having a mental health crisis when these documents were signed. They provided medical records showing you were prescribed anxiety medication. I stared at her. What medical records? I've never been treated for anxiety. I've never been prescribed medication. Sharon slid papers across the table. Prescription records in my name from a doctor I'd never seen, dated over the past 2 years. Medications I'd never taken. These are fake. I've never seen that doctor. Sharon's expression didn't change. They claim you were self-medicating, making erratic decisions. They say they tried to help you. They provided emails expressing concern about your behavior. She showed me printed emails, messages between my parents and Courtney discussing my supposed erratic behavior. Hope has been making concerning financial decisions. We're worried about Hope's mental state. Hope insists she didn't sign documents, but we watched her do it. All dated from the past year. They'd been building a paper trail for months, creating evidence that I was unstable, unreliable, mentally ill. They'd planned this long before the IRS audit even happened. I tried to explain, but I heard how it sounded. I was living on a friend's couch, working at a convenience store, fired from my job. My family looked stable and successful and credible. I looked like exactly what they were portraying, unstable. The deposition lasted 3 hours. Sharon asked about every document, every transaction, every decision. I answered honestly, but I could see she didn't believe me. By the end, I felt like I'd just buried myself. Sharon closed her folder. We'll continue our investigation and be in touch. I left the federal building feeling defeated. I'd brought evidence, told the truth, and it hadn't mattered. My family's lies were more convincing than my truth. I went back to Diana's house, ready to collapse on her couch. but my belongings were sitting on the front porch. Diana's husband, Marcus, opened the door. He looked apologetic but firm. "Hope, I'm sorry. My firm just got retained by your family's business to review their accounting systems. I have a conflict of interest now. You can't stay here." I stared at him. "They hired you?" "They hired my firm. It's a significant contract. I tried to decline, but my partners overruled me." "I'm so sorry." Diana appeared behind him, crying. "Hope, I'm so sorry. Marcus's job depends on this. We have 3 kids, a mortgage. I can't risk his career." I understood what my family had done. They hadn't hired Marcus's firm for legitimate help. They'd hired them to create a conflict of interest, to separate me from my only friend and ally. It was strategic, calculated, cruel. I took my 2 suitcases without a word. I had nowhere to go. It was January, cold, temperature in the 20s. I went to a women's shelter, but it was full. They gave me a list of other resources. Every place I called was either full or had requirements I couldn't meet. I spent that night in my car in a grocery store parking lot. The engine wouldn't start in the morning, battery dead from the cold. I was parked on a street with $15 to my name. No place to go, no one to call. I sat there in my dead car, crying, when someone knocked on my window. A woman, probably late 50s, professional looking, stood outside. I rolled down the window. "Are you Hope Anderson?" I was terrified. "Another lawsuit? Another problem? Who are you?" "My name is Linda Patterson. I'm an investigative reporter. I've been looking into your family's business for the past 6 months. I think you can help me, and I think I can help you." She handed me a business card through the window. "Your family isn't just running a restaurant supply business. I think it's a front for something bigger, and you might be the key to exposing it." I looked at her card, then at her face. For the first time in months, I felt something besides despair. I felt possibility. Linda Patterson drove me to a coffee shop and bought me breakfast. Real food, not convenience store snacks. Eggs and toast and orange juice. I tried not to eat too fast, but I was starving. I hadn't had a real meal in days. Linda waited until I'd finished eating before she opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I've been investigating a loan fraud scheme operating in this state for the past year," she said. "Multiple small business owners have been victims. Someone has been creating shell companies, taking out loans using fake businesses as collateral, then defaulting. The losses total over $3 million across 12 businesses." She spread out documents on the table between us. Lists of company names, loan amounts, dates. "Your family's business is connected. It's been listed as a vendor for 8 different companies. These companies all defaulted on loans in the past 3 years. The restaurant supply business provided equipment purchase receipts to help them secure the loans." I looked at the documents. I recognized the company letterhead, our logo. We did supply equipment to a lot of small businesses, but the equipment was never delivered. Linda pulled out more papers. I verified with the companies. They paid for equipment they never received. The money disappeared. The receipts were forgeries. I felt sick. My parents wouldn't do that. Maybe not knowingly. But someone at your business was part of this scheme, and your signature is on some of these fraudulent receipts. She showed me copies. Purchase orders, receiving documents, all with my signature. But I'd never seen these documents before. I'd never approved these orders. I didn't sign these. I believe you. But someone forged your signature very well. Someone who had access to your signature samples, who understood your business processes, who could create convincing forgeries. I thought about Derek, Courtney's ex-boyfriend from 4 years ago. He'd been a commercial lender. He'd spent months at the business, claimed he was helping Courtney understand the company. He had complete access to everything. "There was someone," I said slowly. "Derek. He dated my sister about 4 years ago. He was in and out of the office all the time. He could have copied my signature, learned the systems." Linda leaned forward. "Tell me everything about Derek." I told her what I remembered. Derek had dated Courtney for about 8 months. He was charming, professional, drove a nice car. He'd spent a lot of time at the business office, always very interested in how everything worked. After he and Courtney broke up, he disappeared. No social media presence. No employment records I could find later. Linda took notes. Derek might not be his real name. These fraud schemes often use false identities. If he's the person I think he is, he's done this in 3 other states. What do you need from me? Everything you can remember. Documents you have access to, timelines, details about Derek, about how the business operated. I need to build a case that connects all these dots. If I help you, my parents could face criminal charges. Linda was honest. Yes. If they knowingly participated, they'll be prosecuted. But if they were also victims, if someone manipulated them, that will come out too. The truth will come out either way. The question is whether you want to be part of exposing it, or whether you want to keep being blamed for it. I thought about everything my family had done to me. The lawsuit, the credit card fraud, the fake medical records, taking everything from me and leaving me homeless. The choice wasn't hard. I'll help you. I'll tell you everything. Linda arranged for me to stay in a cheap motel. She paid for a week up front. It wasn't much, just a bed and a bathroom, but it was warm and safe. For the next week, I worked with Linda every day. We documented everything I could remember, created timelines of Derek's involvement. I provided my personnel records showing I hadn't even been working on days when some documents were supposedly signed. Linda contacted the FBI. An agent named Michelle Torres took over the investigation. She was in her 40s, sharp and professional. She'd been tracking similar fraud schemes in 3 states. Your information is exactly what we needed, Agent Torres told me in our first meeting. We've been trying to connect these cases for months. You're the missing link. She offered me immunity in exchange for full cooperation. You testify about everything you know, provide all documents and information, and we'll protect you from prosecution. You'll be a witness, not a defendant. I signed the immunity agreement that day. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a witness. I had legal protection and the truth on my side. Agent Torres arranged for me to stay in a protected hotel while the investigation continued. Linda's newspaper agreed to hold the story until after arrests were made. I began sleeping through the night for the first time since this nightmare started. My parents somehow learned I was cooperating with reporters and FBI. The phone calls started again, but different this time. Pure panic instead of manipulation. My father called, his voice shaking. "What have you done? You're destroying the family." My mother left voicemails, crying. "Please, Hope, think of your sister's wedding. Don't ruin this for her. Don't ruin everything." I answered one call, finally. My mother was on the line. "Mom, I'm telling the truth. All of it. What happens next is a consequence of what you did, not what I'm doing. We're your parents. You owe us loyalty. You taught me to value truth over loyalty. I'm just applying the lesson." I hung up. Courtney showed up at my motel one night around midnight. Security called my room. She was pounding on the lobby door, screaming my name. I called hotel security and started recording on my phone. I could hear her through the door. "This is all your fault, Hope. Derek wouldn't have targeted us if you hadn't been so incompetent. You made us vulnerable. You ruined everything." Her words were recorded. She'd just confirmed the family knew about Derek's involvement. Security escorted her out. I gave the recording to Agent Torres the next morning. Agent Torres called me 2 days later, her voice urgent. "We're moving up the arrests. Someone tipped off Derek. He's trying to flee the country. We're executing warrants now." I turned on the news. Multiple locations being raided simultaneously. I watched footage of my parents being led out of their house in handcuffs, Courtney screaming at reporters on the front lawn. The business locked down with FBI tape across the doors. But there was someone else being arrested. George Brennan, the family's CPA for the past 15 years. Agent Torres called me to explain. George wasn't just complicit. He was Derek's partner. They'd been running this scheme together for 5 years. George had been manipulating your parents, convincing them transactions were legitimate when they weren't. When the IRS audit started, George helped them create the plan to blame you. I felt dizzy. George, the man who'd done our taxes every year, who'd sat at our holiday dinners, who my parents trusted completely. He'd orchestrated everything. The forged documents, the fake medical records, the coordinated attack on my life. He'd planned all of it. He kept Courtney involved by promising her a cut of the money. Agent Torres continued. She knew what was happening. She helped forge documents. She participated in the fraud scheme. I watched the news coverage from my hotel room. My entire family's world was collapsing on live television. And I was the one who'd brought it down. I'd exposed the truth they'd tried so hard to hide. I'd saved myself by destroying them. But as I watched my sister crying on TV, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. 3 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom. The preliminary hearings had been going on for weeks. I'd testified multiple times already, always calm, always truthful. Today was different. Today, I was testifying in Courtney's trial. Derek had pleaded guilty almost immediately, agreed to testify against everyone else in exchange for a reduced sentence. George fought the charges at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged documents, testimony from multiple victims. He eventually took a plea deal, 20 years in federal prison. My parents cut a deal too. They pleaded guilty to lesser charges, agreed to cooperate fully. They'd been manipulated by George and Derek, but they'd also known something was wrong and looked the other way. They'd known about the forged signatures. They'd participated in the plan to blame me. The judge sentenced them to 5 years each, eligible for parole after 3. Courtney was the only one who refused to cooperate. She insisted she'd been manipulated by Derek, that she knew nothing about the fraud. But the evidence told a different story. Bank records showed she'd received over $200,000 in payments over 4 years. She'd helped forge documents. She'd participated in creating the fake medical records meant to discredit me. The prosecutor showed the jury my timeline. How I'd left the family business, tried to start over. How immediately after I refused to take the blame for the fraud, the attacks began. The forged credit card charges, the fake medical records, the lawsuit, the coordinated campaign to destroy my life. I sat in the witness box, wearing a suit Linda had helped me buy for the trial. I explained the family dynamics, the scapegoating, the favoritism, how Courtney had always been protected while I was always blamed, how even when she committed fraud, they found a way to make it my responsibility. Courtney's defense attorney cross-examined me. He was young and aggressive, trying to paint me as vindictive. Isn't it true you resented your sister? I resented being treated as less valuable, yes. But I didn't resent Courtney. I just wanted to be seen. Isn't it true you wanted her engagement to Trevor to fail? I wanted her to be honest with him. Truth isn't sabotage. You're testifying to get revenge, aren't you? I looked directly at the jury. I'm testifying because I was framed for crimes I didn't commit, because my family destroyed my life to protect themselves. This isn't revenge, it's justice. The defense couldn't shake me. I'd lived this nightmare. I knew every detail. I had documentation for everything. The jury deliberated for 1 day. When they came back, I was sitting in the gallery with Linda. The 4-person stood. Guilty on all counts. Courtney started crying. My parents, sitting in the front row, cried too. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. Just a strange emptiness. The judge sentenced Courtney to 4 years in federal prison. She'd serve at least 3 before being eligible for parole. After the verdict, there was still financial resolution to handle. The court ordered restitution. The business assets were seized and liquidated. Victims of the fraud scheme received partial repayment. My debts were cleared. The fraudulent credit card charges, the lawsuits, all dismissed. The loan guarantee was voided due to the fraud. I received a check for $18,000. Back wages the business had owed me, plus interest. It wasn't much compared to what I'd lost, but it was a start. I used part of the money to rent a small one-bedroom apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Clean and quiet and safe. I enrolled in online college courses. I dropped out of school to work for the family business 10 years ago. Now I could finish my degree. Linda Patterson's newspaper series about the fraud scheme won a regional journalism award. She credited my courage in her acceptance speech. I watched it online from my apartment, feeling proud of what we'd accomplished together. I became a minor local figure, the whistleblower who saved herself. A nonprofit that helped fraud victims navigate the legal system offered me a job. My experience made me valuable. I could help others document their cases, find lawyers, understand the complex process of fighting back against fraud. The job paid $45,000 a year, more than I'd ever made at the family business. But more importantly, I found purpose. I helped people like me, people betrayed by those they trusted. Trevor reached out a few months after the trial. We met for coffee occasionally, just as friends. He apologized again for not seeing what was happening sooner. "You deserved better from all of us," he said. My grandmother called me unexpectedly one afternoon. She was 83 and hadn't spoken to me since before the trial. "I'm ashamed of them," she said without preamble. "My son, my granddaughter. I'm ashamed. But I'm proud of you, Hope. You did the right thing." We started meeting for lunch once a month. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt a relationship. She was the only family I had left who didn't hate me. 1 year after the arrests, I attended a fraud victim advocacy conference in Chicago. I was a speaker on a panel about fighting back against family fraud. There were about 200 people in the audience, all survivors of similar situations. After my panel, I saw my mother in the crowd. She'd aged significantly. The trial, the shame, the loss of everything had taken a visible toll. She approached me hesitantly. "Can we talk? Just for a few minutes?" We sat in the hotel lobby. She twisted a tissue in her hands. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know I'm sorry." I waited, she continued. We were in over our heads. George told us everything would be fine if we just followed his advice. When the IRS came, I panicked. I didn't think about what we were doing to you. I just wanted to protect Courtney. "You always wanted to protect Courtney," I said quietly. "What about protecting me?" She started crying. "I failed you. I see that now. I prioritized the wrong daughter. You were always so strong, so capable. I thought you didn't need me." "I needed you," I said. "I needed a mother who saw me." "I know. I'm so sorry." I took a breath. "I don't forgive you yet. Maybe someday, but not now. I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to save myself. I understand. You taught me that family is supposed to protect each other, but you only protected Courtney. So I had to become my own family. I had to protect myself." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "If you want a relationship with me eventually, it has to be different, honest, equal. You can't expect me to sacrifice myself for the family anymore." "I understand," she whispered. "I'll wait, however long it takes." We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we parted with less hostility than before. That night, alone in my hotel room, I thought about my journey. From the daughter who walked away quietly that night 3 months ago, to the woman who'd fought back and won. I'd lost my family, my innocence, my naivety. But I'd gained something more valuable. I'd gained myself. I'd learned I was strong enough to survive losing everything. I'd learned that truth matters more than peace. I'd learned that love without respect is worthless. For years, I'd thought loyalty meant accepting mistreatment from people I loved. I'd thought being strong meant enduring pain silently. I'd thought family was supposed to stay together no matter what. But real strength is knowing when to walk away. Real loyalty is to truth, not to people who betray you. And real family is built on respect, not obligation. On my last day in Chicago, I went hiking in a forest preserve outside the city. It was a sunny Saturday in October, exactly 1 year since those 40 missed calls changed everything. I reached a clearing with a view over the trees, sat on a rock, and just breathed. I thought about that night I left my parents' house, how I drove away crying, thinking I'd lost everything, how those 40 missed calls represented their panic, not their love, how they'd tried to trap me, control me, destroy me, and how I'd survived it all. I pulled out my phone and looked at my blocked call list. My mother's number was still there. I unblocked it. Not to call her, not to invite her back into my life, just to stop hiding. If she called someday, I'd decide then whether to answer. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I took a photo of the view and posted it to my social media account with a simple caption. 1 year ago today, I had nothing. Today, I have everything that matters. My truth, my dignity, and my freedom. Comments flooded in within minutes. People I'd helped through the nonprofit, friends I'd made, fraud survivors who'd heard my story and felt less alone. Linda commented, "Proud of you, friend." I smiled and started the hike back to my car. Tomorrow I had work. Another victim needed help, filing their case, documenting their evidence, understanding their rights. But today, I had peace. I finally felt like hope again. Not my family's scapegoat, not their victim, not the daughter who was never good enough. Just hope. And that was enough. The real triumph wasn't the convictions or the restitution or the justice. It was becoming a woman who would never again accept being blamed for someone else's failures, who would never again stay quiet to keep the peace, who would never again mistake endurance for strength. I didn't just survive my family's betrayal. I transformed it into purpose. I became the person who saves others like myself. And that was the greatest victory of all. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between protecting yourself and protecting people you love? Where loyalty to family meant betraying yourself? How did you handle it? What would you do if you were in my position? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about truth and loyalty and what real family means, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about real people facing impossible choices and finding the strength to fight back. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that you're stronger than you think, that truth matters, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is save yourself. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, you deserve respect, not just love. You deserve to be seen, not just tolerated. And you deserve a life where you don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Until next time, be kind to yourselves. You're worth fighting for.